Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Made Visible with me, Ankur. In today's episode, let's get into our first clip.
On some very bizarre cases in Brooklyn. These are people who have been mutilated like cattle. These people were all, Jeremy,
Freaks me
your
out, man.
face, jeez.
Freaks me out.
Well, I don't blame you. It freaks everyone out. These people were all in the same state in the world. They were all homeless. They were taken from the streets of Brooklyn. They were street people. They were then mutilated, then drowned in the ocean, and the bodies returned to like rooftops and stuff near where they had been taken. Now, when I first read this story, or she told me about it actually, I didn't read it. I said to her, well, I want some documentation. And when I got the documentation, it included a description of the autopsies of what they found, the damage they found, a lot of it. And something told me immediately that it was true. And this is what it was. There is here, just above the C1 vertebra, a spot that if the right frequency, electric frequency is applied there, you will feel what feel like clamps opening up and down your spine. They're the chakras, and they will open, and you will roll right out of your body in a perfectly intact state. And all of these cases were the same. Someone had busted into the spine right at that point and stuck something down into it to wreck the spine. In other words, they were extracting the soul like extracting an oyster from its shell.
All right, welcome back, guys and girls. Let's start our episode today with a news coverage of something really interesting. So, already there is a lot of pressure on the Pentagon to release, and release. However, whatever we've been seeing them release has been very basic. Things that were already around, things that make no sense, and things that are just boring. And the Pentagon and the Department of War, or whatever they're getting in their hands to release to us, they believe that we as a society will give up and stop believing that there could be anything more than grainy, blurry, night vision type of footage. Yeah, well, they're hoping and they're trying with their efforts to make sure that we give up out of boredom. But there is the most interesting man in the room right now. And I don't know if he's working for the establishment or against it. But at some level, he wants to be the disclosure president. And that's why Trump has formed a UAP science board. And he's made the most colorful person you could, right? The guy who was not scared to come forward and look like an idiot. Although in doing so, he looks like less of one. It's Avi Loeb. And this news coverage is about that.
Our next guest is the head of that advisory council, Avi Loeb, joins me now. He's also the director of Harvard's Institute for Theory and Computation and wrote the book Extraterrestrial. Avi, welcome back. Okay. Is it your job as the person in charge of this council? Are you guys going to finally explain what these objects are in these videos, or what? Are you going to get to the bottom of it all?
Well, thanks for having me. That's exactly the intention. On the same day that the third batch was released, Steven Spielberg put out his film, Disclosure Day. But I think it's much more interesting to live through the reality rather than the artistic freedom of displayed in the script of Spielberg. And frankly, my car is not being crashed against a moving train, as you find in the film. The government is actually cooperating with me, with scientists. And that's very exciting because it means that indeed there are objects they cannot figure out. And if they were suspecting that these objects are definitely human made, they would have expressed that opinion in memos written to the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, rather than sharing it in a file release to the public and asking scientists to help them.
How are you going to figure out what these things are?
His happiness is just beyond him. It's glowing through his face right now.
By following the evidence. We need to keep our eyes on the orbs, not on the audience. And by the audience, I mean social media people having opinions. By collecting better data with better sensors, analyzing it with the latest AI software, then we can make progress. And we can advise the US government of.
So this video that you're watching is one of the good videos from the third tranche of UFO videos that the US Department of War has released. So these are like two lights in the sky floating across. This is probably the clearest footage we have, at least we've been shown, of this phenomenon.
Of how to collect this data, because at the very least, if you have a down-to-earth interpretation of these objects, they are a national security threat. If they are human-made, produced by adversarial nations, we have holes in our defense system of the US, and there need to be more priority given to figuring them out. And in the process of getting better data and figuring them out, we might realize that one of the objects is not human-made, and it's sufficient to have one in order for that to be the biggest discovery ever made by humanity.
When you say follow the evidence, is the only evidence these videos, or is there other evidence, whether it be witness testimony, or is there even tangible scientific evidence?
Yeah, so it needs to be evidence from multiple sensors, so we are sure that the objects are real and not optical illusions. We need to figure out their distance and the velocity acceleration that they exhibit, which would convince us if they are outside the performance envelope of human-made technologies. And finally, if there is any material, and that could include the biological material, but any material from crash sites.
By the way, these are not really moving that way. These are just a series of pictures taken by a really good camera at night or early morning.
Of such unidentified objects would be very useful in the scientific analysis. And, it's not clear what the government exactly has because the most...
Yeah, it's not clear what the government has, and what the government has is not clear. Let's accept that. Okay, so the next video is with Bryce Zabel, who was responsible for breaking the first News Nation story along with Ross Coulthard. He was the tech backup for him. They were collaborating together, and the news was broken, and the interview of David Grush happened through both of them being there. In fact, it happened at Bryce Zabel's home, if I'm not wrong. And here is an interesting clip of them discussing, because Bryce Zabel is also very close to Steven Spielberg, and them discussing this actually gives a little bit of provenance to what they're saying, gives a little bit of weightage to the opinions and the accounts of Bryce Zabel.
And for example, you have crates with TRW and Lockheed on them.
Right.
You have on top of Devil's.
They're talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a Steven Spielberg movie, and they're discussing it in the context that Steven Spielberg definitely had access, something that I've been telling, and I did say even in our Steven Spielberg special episode, that he has access to these things, because if you see his body of work, the detail with which and the accuracy with which things are portrayed, sometimes at the expense of being boring, they are still portrayed way too factually for it to be just a figment of his imagination, or either that or he understands this subject telepathically well. He's being led by some government agency, and we all already know that he has very good ties with the top.
Devil's Tower, it's like they're playing tones, kind of like Valerie Ransone in the Ether ship. They were like trying to communicate with, aliens. And then obviously,
They're just showing the commonalities between actual people accounts, of experiencers, and showing how deeply Steven Spielberg has also adopted and portrayed the same experiences in his work, the various different accounts.
J.Allen Hynek, who was, chief astronomer of Blue Book, is there. Francois Truffaut is playing Jacques Vallée for the, the whole movie. Dustin Hoffman has like a sunburn, which shows kind of this UV radiation, gravitational lensing thing, which you can hear Hal Puthoff talking about in Age of Disclosure.
Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss.
Right.
Sorry, not Dustin Hoffman.
He'd have been good in the role, though. I have to say, he'd have been great.
And like looks slightly like
And by the way, whether you believe it or not, put that aside, there's a whole kind of visual reference to Project Serpo in there, right? Because it's all of the guys, there's 12 guys dressed in suits.
Yeah, Project Serpo, like it's mentioned on the screen, is a theory that there exists a project between the US government and whatever alien species that they are in contact with, where they exchange, like students go from Japan to America or India to Australia as a student exchange. They have an alien exchange program where humans go visit and learn about the alien ways, the alien culture, and they return.
Suits ready to go on an exchange program.
Right.
With their little travel bags.
With their little travel bags and the whole thing.
Yeah, and they come out of the,
And then Richard Dreyfuss is number 13.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that gets...
And Richard Dreyfuss also gets obsessed with, like, it's like the mashed, what is it? The mashed potatoes.
It's the shape of Devil's Tower where all of this is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so he's getting, you go deconstruct that movie, when he gets the ship over him and he gets the sunburn, he's getting a download.
Yeah.
Right? And he's getting that imagery, and it's almost like, and that's what Melinda Dillon gets, like the woman who has the little kid that gets abducted. She's drawing, all these people are getting a download of something they become obsessed with. They all converge on Devil's Tower, right? So there was a lot of stuff that was going on in that movie that was either very prescient or was informed to some degree.
And E.T., very similar. You have this kind of symbiotic relationship where you have a syncing of like the heartbeats of the child and E.T. You have the mother's inability to see the E.T. walking around the kitchen, but the kids can all see it.
Right.
And you have that. They have that story of Spielberg screening it in the White House for Reagan.
Yes.
And then Spielberg says this in an interview himself. He says, Reagan looks around and he says there are about 5 people in this room who knows that everything they just saw on that screen is absolutely real.
Yes.
Crazy talk, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy.
And then Reagan goes and talks to the United Nations and says, wouldn't it be great if we all united to fight off an alien invasion?
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that bit of sentence, he actually starts to immediately go a different direction from there. But if you cut that much out, Reagan already seemed to know way too much as a president. And either it was his very high majority because of which he became president, or it was his way to finesse information that led him to go that way. But let's talk about another president who screwed it up for all of us. So in Disclosure Day, there is a precedent that is shown, President Nixon, and he, overawed by a TV celebrity, takes him one night, probably half drunk, to a base containing dead alien bodies, probably even an alive alien. And there is footage of that which has been recreated by Steven Spielberg. And if you see the movie version of it, there is no way that Steven Spielberg hasn't seen that footage, the real one, the way it's made, right? It's edited out, and the key moments are shown where the celebrity arrives and they go in, and then they show these alien bodies. And that's when the first exposure to anything alien in terms of biologics occurs in that movie Disclosure Day. But that's also shown as the primary reason why the US deep state, so to say, what we call the deep state today, starts understanding that presidents, the US presidents, are just people who will go away after 4 years or 8 years when their mandate is over, and they will just remain people, while all the life's work that these officials are putting into researching, collecting, safeguarding these secrets, especially related to alien bodies and the consciousness surrounding them, that starts to weaken because of just people, regular people, going into elected offices. Anyway.
When I grew up in the Bay Area, in a place called Walnut Creek, which is East Bay. And we lived right next door to this family where there was...
So this guy is talking about a story that got him in, that made him a believer. The story starts to get darker, but it leaves a lot to our imagination. There are theories that they discuss, but the story by itself...
There was a guy named John Harrington, his wife Lois, his two daughters, I'm not going to name them. His daughters were in between my brother and I. So I was the oldest of the four kids. My brother was the youngest. And I mean, we literally lived right next door. And there was like one gate between us. And we lived on these pretty big pieces of property. So we didn't have any other real neighbors. It was just us, kids growing up. And John was a man's man. He was all the things I wanted to be. My dad was an artist. And so I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to do all these things. John taught me how to throw a football, got me into football, taught me how to hold a gun, shoot a BB gun, like just all these things. And loved my dad, but he was an artist. He wasn't interested in any of this stuff. So he was like a surrogate father to me. Cut to, we move away 6 years later. We stay in touch, the families. And then I get a phone call. I've just graduated from high school. It's 1981, and I'm going to UCLA. And John had suggested that I go to Stanford, which was his alma mater, but I'm going to UCLA to be a theater major. So he calls me up and he says, hey, what are you doing? And I can't believe you didn't go to Stanford. He goes, listen, I got a new job. I'm back east now. And I'd like you and maybe a couple friends to drive our cars across the country. Oh, and our dog, bring our dog with you and some other stuff that we left in the garage. But I'll pay you guys. And then when you get back here, I'll show you around DC and then I'll fly you back. I'm thinking, what a great summer.
Sweet deal for a college kid.
Right. It's like, this is the in between high school and college. So I'm thinking, sure, I can do that. So he didn't say anything about what his job was, but actually we knew something was going on because about a year earlier or so, we had been approached, the family, by some like NSA or like CIA or someone that come in and asked a bunch of questions. I guess they were doing like a background character check on him, but they didn't tell us what the job was, but we knew it was something with the government. And he has just moved back to Langley Farms, Virginia. So,
by the way, in 1981, we now know John Harrington was the Undersecretary of the Navy for, I believe, development or procurement or something like that.
And I believe he went through Stanford on a naval ROTC scholarship. Okay, so Navy.
And he will later become the Secretary of Energy in the second term.
Department of Energy.
There you go.
So none of this means anything to me.
So whatever they mentioned, the sequence of events of this person's life, they're all highly suspicious, or rather deeply connected with this topic, because Stanford is all right? That's a cutoff. He, from Stanford, moved to Langley Farms in Virginia. The CIA, the FBI, and a dozen other really, really deep agencies all based themselves in Virginia. So him being there meant that he was in some position of great importance to them. Then from there, he goes into the Department of Energy. They say that the Department of Energy, which houses this atomic energy generation project, like nuclear power plants across the United States, they have one of the largest, probably equaling NASA. They have one of the largest troves of videos on this subject, because UFOs are always attracted to nuclear energy on Earth. You will always see these things come in and scan these nuclear power plants, checking for, I don't even know what. Even the people close to the matter don't know what they're checking for. But if you have a nuclear anything, a nuclear bomb, a nuclear missile, a tactical nuclear missile, anything that splits atoms, they're there. They're there checking on you. So this person goes from Langley Farms after getting vetted by some serious agency about his background. He then becomes someone in the Department of Energy, especially a secretary, someone who's a secretary at the Department of Energy. Man, that guy knows secrets.
To me, he's just a great friend. He's like my surrogate dad. The drive across the country, I don't know why we weren't killed or put in jail many times. That's a whole other movie I've never written. We get to his house that night when he comes home, where everyone's waiting to have dinner because it's going to be like this reunion. And I remember kind of like waiting at the window, kind of waiting to see when all of a sudden a black Lincoln Town Car pulls up. And he gets out of the back seat and there's two Secret Service people that come in. And I notice he has a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. They walk him into the house and into kind of off the entryway into his office. And they go back and I'm kind of watching from a distance. No one will even make eye contact with me. And I'm watching from a distance and he puts it into a wall safe, right? One of the Secret Service people leaves and the other one stays in the house. I'm thinking, who is this guy? But he comes, hey, Brian, how's it going? We have a big dinner and everything's great. And then afterwards, he's like, hey, why don't you and I go out onto the veranda and catch up? So when we were growing up, he was not just like badass, but he was Calvinist. So he was very strict about certain things. We go out into the back patio and he brings a big bottle of Jim Beam and he's pouring himself 2 fingers as we're talking. He looks haggard. He looks, old, like very much older, but also just heavy now. He's a different guy. I'm sitting there talking with him. We're catching up. He's giving me shit about not going to Stanford. And I'm like, okay, all of that's great. What is your job? And he goes, I can't really talk about it. I'm working for the government. Now, he was Reagan's advance man in his campaign. He was one of the reasons that he helped Reagan get elected. There's a whole history between John's wife, Lois Haight, who's, I think one of her family members was a governor of California back in the day. And so politics, Republican, Reagan trusts him. And this is a super smart guy. And now he's telling me, I can't tell you what the job is. It's classified. And I said, okay, well, I don't, what does that even mean? And he goes, look, I have a higher clearance level than the president. Now, 1981, 18 years old, I was not a standout in civics. I was like That's impossible. The president, there is nothing higher than the president. How could the guy who lived next door to me have higher classification than the president? But this is not a guy who lies. Like, so I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, what? I'm like, okay. And I said, well, how did you get that job? And he said, well, I was briefed for months in an underground facility in West Virginia. Again, this is the guy you grew up with. Like this, I'm like looking at this person like, I don't even know who this man is anymore. And I said, what was that like? And he said, well, I used to cry myself to sleep every night.
That's, by the way, when he said that to me at this lunch, I just got shiver.
Right. So he cries himself to sleep every night. And this is a guy who has been briefed for months in an underground facility somewhere, which probably is a skiff. A skiff, a secure, compartmentalized information facility, something like that, is the room in which they tape in multiple different types of sensors and recorders, and then they give you information. They make you sign your life out to them in case you break confidentiality or their confidence or any of the terms of the paper you just signed. And you get to know so many different things. And in this subject, what I have learned over a number of years now is that information, especially the truth, the more of the truth you know, the more of a danger you become. Also, the more they would like you to be one of the people who is working with them in protecting the secret. Whatever the secret is, we still don't know, right? And I wonder if we'd ever know. Maybe someday when we're ready. But these secrets, once you know them, two things happen once you know these secrets. First is that because of your signature on that piece of paper where you sign your life away, you are now under the behest of the government, or at least the officers and the team that has chosen to disclose to you. So you knowing the secret means you're liable to them. You are in their control. The second thing that happens is that by knowing the truth, you are no longer part of any common mass of people, but rather you are one of the select few who is now able to use that information to protect it. So it's kind of like a you must know it to protect it kind of situation. But something of this nature where a guy goes from Stanford to Department of Energy and does an honest to honest discussion with someone he knows, calls him cross country, tries to push him probably for Stanford. He just wanted to relieve himself of the burden. And the guy who's giving you this account, sitting next to Bruce Zabel, might also just be hiding a lot of it, but because it was told in confidence, he can't say it out.
Because a tough guy is crying himself to sleep every night. What's it take for that to happen?
Yeah. And even if he's exaggerating, I couldn't have imagined him crying himself to sleep once.
Right.
So I said, well, what would make you cry yourself to sleep? And he goes, Brent, this is not the world I thought I was bringing my daughters into. And I'm thinking, well, I'm like your son. What is this world that we're in? And so I pressed him on it, and he kept saying, I can't talk about that. I can't talk about it. This is like classified information. And finally, after he'd had a couple drinks, he said, all right, look, I know when you were growing up, you were into science fiction and comic books and all that stuff. I can tell you this. Aliens are real. They're here, and I've seen them. just like that. Just like, here, I'll throw you a bone, kid. Now, I honestly, at that point in my life, I hadn't thought a lot about aliens. I wasn't into aliens. This wasn't a thing in my life. But this felt huge. Like I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And I said, well, are they alive? And he paused and he said, I can't say. I said, you can't say or you won't say? And he said, I can't say. And I kind of just left it at that. And then I came back at him with, okay, well, hold on a second. If what you're saying is true, how does everyone not know about it? And he said, oh, lots of people know about it. 81, you could walk into any bookstore and you're going to find all sorts of books on the shelves with lots of truth. But right next to them are the books that we publish, full of propaganda. It's a multi-billion-dollar campaign to cover up the truth. Now, in 81, the other thing that struck me was I don't know that I'd heard the term billion before. So I'm like,
there goes some amount of imagination. A lot of first-hand accounts of people who have seen, interacted with aliens, or dealt with any material that is alien in nature, they all have this common thread that goes across their narrative, which is that they are in shock of the world that exists versus the one that is shown to us. We are fed all of this misinformation. Like he said, the multi-billion-dollar campaign to take two portions of truth and then to put a lie in between, as he put it in X-Files. They take 2 parts truth and 1 part fiction, right? So you never know which is the crazy part, which is the part that seems the most craziest to you. It could be the one that's fiction, or it could just be the one that's real. When you hear these kind of accounts, and you will hear a lot with me on the show of these kinds of accounts, the commonality is that probably the crazier parts are the truth, but there is really no way to tell. Unless someone who works in there has that kind of access, is the one mixing the lies into the truth. Unless we find that guy, we're really never getting to the bottom of this. In that note, let's talk about our friend Jeremy Corbell. He has this cool podcast. He came in recently and they're discussing about what the government or David Grush said in his testimony to Congress, where he said that the US government is in contact with beings that are interdimensional, has records of interdimensional beings. So interdimensional now becomes this whole nother elevated discussion of a completely different force that exists right here, which means they've not traveled light years or kilometers, not actual distance to get here, but rather that they're already here and then they're next to us in another dimension which we can't see, and sometimes they spill over to our dimension. So let's listen to him talk about that.
Now, I can give you the 4 or 5 top theories from government, like what these beings and pilots and intelligences are, because it may be much stranger.
Great, let's hear it, because non-human biologics is another one that he kept saying.
So David Grush, non-human intelligence. So words are weapons, right? So if you say alien, okay, that's a very limited scope. You're talking about a being from another planet. But if you say a non-human intelligence, he
said non-human biologics.
We'll get to biologics, okay. But I want to deal with the first thing you said about interdimensional, yep. Okay? So non-human intelligence is the idea that if it's not human and it's hyper intelligent or just intelligent, right, then that's a non-human intelligence. We're talking about people, though, that make craft that can outperform anything we have in our arsenals. So what the fuck? So when he said interdimensional, and you should ask him directly, he is conveying what a lot of us have talked about for a long time. we don't know the origins, the ultimate origins of these craft. Now, they do appear to be designed to travel amongst the stars. So, like, I always make the joke, why would you make a Ferrari if you didn't want to fucking go fast, right? Why would you make something that could travel amongst stars if you didn't? So that leads me personally to think at least part of this UFO phenomenon is interstellar, right? Going to other star systems or maybe galaxies, because there's no limit on how these things work. I used to think distance mattered when I was a kid, till I heard Bob Lazar and I realized that distance doesn't matter if they propel through non-reactionary propulsion systems.
That's right, which is a huge part of this.
We'll get there, but I want to directly answer your questions. I'm not accused of it. Okay, so check it out. Interdimensional.
Yeah.
If you understand what that means, that you are far the fuck ahead of me, because I can't live in this dimension. I don't know what that means. I know a Rubik's Cube. I know, like, you look at drawings of squares that end up being three-dimensional. Interdimensional. Okay. So that would suggest that there is another, there's, have you ever watched Stranger Things?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not, that would suggest an upside down. That would suggest that there is something that is always present and right here. And it's like our eyes only see a certain spectrum, our ears only hear a certain spectrum, but it's deeper than that. It's saying that there is a world within, perforating, surrounding, touching, manipulating, interfacing with what we know to be tangible reality. So the common thought now is that these craft are not just from other planets, but there may be visitation where they're perforating dimensionally our environment, and we see glimpses of them, like you would see a piece of paper. I'll do this, and it just pokes through, and you see, I had to do that, and it pokes through. That is the idea, right? Like, instead of seeing a circle, that circle is two-dimensional, but that's let's say it's an orange, it's a sphere. So if that's what he's saying, which it is, one possibility is that these visitors or watchers are from another dimension, but there's other options: extraterrestrial, interdimensional, extratemporal. You also have the idea.
Extratemporal is from Earth, but from a different time. Mostly from the future. Or from way in the past, traveling into the future. Very advanced civilizations somewhere in the past, traveling down into the future. And that's us.
Of breakaway civilizations, as if.
And this is an episode that is going to get made. Breakaway civilizations, where there is this whole theory which
they're just fucking from here and they're living in the damn ocean. And
well, that's another one that they're supposedly, well, they're not supposedly, there's people reporting that they're seeing crafts coming out of the ocean.
Yeah,
there's something with the ocean.
Well, there is, and there's a reason, because of the physics of the craft, that is a fact. But you also have just the idea of ultra-terrestrial, right? Hal Puthoff talked about this. It's the idea that it's a civilization that did some amazing things, and when there was a cataclysm, they used their technology and have been here all along.
Like the Anunnaki?
I don't know.
What's that guy? I don't know. But wait, hold on.
Not the Anunnaki.
Here.
I'm so excited.
Techno-terrestrial is my favorite
talking
theory,
this
though.
weird shit. Okay, so sorry. Just to wrap my brain around this. Are you suggesting one of the theories is that we are the byproduct of like aliens, basically? Like they came here, they fucked a bunch of us, they created us,
or just manipulated our genetic.
All right, so they veer off topic from here, but ultra-terrestrials is exactly what he said, where they're so advanced that they actually have been here before the downfall. Like a lot of these old texts commonly talk about a major flood. Yes, even Hindu texts. Every kind of texts that go way back to 12,000 years talk about the Younger Dryas period, where there was a huge flood and everything got wiped out and continents moved, they shifted, and maybe even the Earth's pole kind of flipped on itself. So further in the interview, he's talking about the fact that he has seen orbs, And this is the first time I'm actually hearing this from him, where he's very candidly talking about meeting up, like having this experience first and then meeting up with someone after that who summoned an orb. He just said, wait here for 2 minutes and I'll show you one. And he does something kind of like worship, like a ritual, but not religious maybe. And he shows him one orb. So he goes around and he manages to solve this.
Meet me.
And then
at this time, at this place, at this parking lot, on the rooftop, or no, he said somewhere else, at this time, this place. And I'll show you. All you got to do is be grateful. And there's a practice you can do. And you'll see him.
And this theme that there is a practice or a ritual to summon UFOs exists. It's recorded. There is this CE5 protocol that you can follow, for example, to have contact, to see one outside. The same way, there are different ways to summon. Actually, we're not really summoning them, but there are different ways to summon them. And this, he goes into like great depth about how these UFOs actually exist already where they are, and we are not really summoning them. It's just that we are kind of bending this bit of reality. The fact that consciousness is actually very important in being able to see these things. So in his experience, they will see orbs and these crafts when he's not around. Maybe because he's too analytical, and maybe you just need to be more open rather than skeptical. So one of the things to see a craft is that you need to be open. You need to be unassuming and probably unaware of what you're seeing, you know. And when you are in that state, when you are in that open state, there's a very high likelihood that some of these things will pop out of another dimension or pop out of invisibility and show themselves to you. And there are encounters where people have seen these things and been able to control them with thought. They're standing down in the ground, these things are in the sky, and they've thought something, and the craft has done it. So it is very strongly linked to consciousness. Whatever these things are able to tap into our consciousness. We are not able to tap into them. So that brings us to the next video, which is with the great Richard Dolan, who's a researcher who has been through countless number of cases and prepared like very deep scientific papers, on this subject, especially on submerged objects in the ocean. And he's even done these crazy Excel sheets where he has broken every kind of encounter that has happened. He has broken them down into commonalities, the common threads. And it's crazy. There's another episode where he goes into that deeply. But for now, we'll just continue with this theme of how these crafts are very, very much connected to our reality, are very much able to hear us, even pull out data that our sensors are generating. And this is that video.
Give me the idea that these beings are joyriding or having fun or, screwing around at humanity's expense. I don't really see any of that behavior. What I interpret, I see behavior of objects that are very elusive, that appear to engage in the following types of activities. They appear to be engaged in monitoring. They appear to be engaged in approaching for a certain period of time. They engage in what I've come to call data denial. That is, they have a very excellent ability to disable a lot of our electronics and communications equipment when they want to, or our recording equipment. So they deny us the opportunity to collect data on them while they are presumably collecting data on us. They will approach military assets with regularity, whether American, whether UK, whether Russian, whether Chinese. They approach those military assets. They appear to be extracting data from them. That's what it looks like to me. And then they're gone. and they're gone. So there's not a great desire that I note from these craft that they're in any way interested in having a relationship with us based on equality. I don't get that at all. I get that they are.
And that's being said by a guy who's written a book, if you see behind him, that says A History of USOs. There's a book right over here that says A History of USOs. That's written by him, Richard Dolan. And that's after reading through thousands of accounts that he's written a book called The History of USOs, which means that they've been seeing these things in the water as well. And there are accounts of these even when Columbus was sailing to find America. And there are older accounts than that too. And he's saying that they don't have any intention of interfacing with us on a basis of equality. And they have total
command of every situation that they seem to be engaging in. They don't seem to be at a loss. They don't seem to have like these screw ups. I don't see that. If they do, it's not really quite evident to me. So I think they're watching us. Maybe they're calibrating themselves against us. Like what new weapon do these humans have now? And they come and they check that out and maybe decide how do we deal with that if we need to. That's totally possible. But they're not. I don't get the sense personally that they're like there's a group of teenage aliens out there that have to be restrained by mom and dad every so often. Not impossible. It wouldn't be impossible that you'd have rogue elements, I suppose, but I don't really see evidence of that in my observation of it. What I see is very, very controlled, very I was going to say rational, but maybe I should say very, very controlled. I think they're very controlled, and they seem to know exactly what they do, and they seem to have no fear of us. They don't seem to be. They don't. I don't think they want to interact with us. I think we're probably. Why would they want to? Actually, what a hassle it would be. I mean, this is a good place to talk about this difference between disclosure and contact. I just do not think, based on any behavior that I've ever seen in this phenomenon, that they have the slightest desire to actually communicate with us in an open way. And how could that be done in a way that wouldn't rip our society apart? I think it would not be possible. I think human society, like who would the aliens talk to? They'd talk to Donald Trump? They would talk to Vladimir Putin? Xi Jinping?
Yeah, so that goes back into the previous episode, what we discussed about how we are broken and contact will happen when we are ready and united as a race rather than a planet with multiple different leaders. So the point to take away from this is also that they really are in control and they're not scared of us at all. When you approach a military asset, heck, China is scared to approach American military assets. China is scared to get close to the American mainland. America is also a little careful when it's around Chinese military assets. It's because we understand that there lies the trigger point where even a slight mistake could result in real destruction, a lot of cost that could be human and financial for either of those nations. So when these alien crafts enter this space, and they don't really care. They stay there for as long as they would like. They pull out all the data. And there is this very interesting video from, I think, the first drop of UFO files that the US Department of War did, where they have this crosshair trying to lock on to this orb or this craft, which is basically evading it. Like the craft is aware that it is being tracked and that now is the lock and now is the lock. And every time the sensor tries to lock on to that object, it moves away. It's like the sensor is moving in and the object moves away. It's very much deliberate and probably trying to make fun of us. Like, look, human, this is all you got? All right, guys, on this note, this is it for me today and on to the next one. See you the next time. Bye-bye.